Hey listeners, it is exciting to be back for another week of Local Rapport. And if you're joining for the first time, this is a podcast about the locals in Calhoun County, Texas. And we get to spend time sharing their stories, roles, and experiences. And I'm excited to kick this week off with our guest, Tania French. She is currently the interim publisher at the Port Lavaca Wave. She is the president of Something More Media. And I just have to brag on her a bit because the past couple of weeks has been exceptionally just daunting with the needs that we had after the winter storm. And she was someone that ran to the needs that our community had. She made sure that any kind of news that was, pertinent to the locals here was given out as soon as possible so that we can be in the know. And also the knack that she has for being involved with all the affairs of the community. It almost seems like she has her hands in a lot of things, but a lot of that has to do because people have high expectations of her and knows that she can deliver with whether it's what she can do personally or the resources that she has to make sure that our town is taken care of. So I'm excited. It's going to be a great episode and I can't wait for you to give it a listen. Enjoy. Hey, Tania, I'm so glad you can make it.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Oh, man. I just want to get us started by having you just introduce to us a little bit about yourself. And after that, if you can, just tell us why the past couple of weeks for you have been exceptionally hectic.
Okay. My name is Tania French. I am president of Something More Media, and I'm head of the Port Lavaca Events Committee. And through my job and my passions, I do a lot of off-the-wall things and a lot of unplanned things. So the last 2 weeks, they have been bizarre, as you know.
Right. Crazy winter-getting of a storm for us local Texans.
Right. We never anticipate. I mean, in our area of town, as you know, we don't often even turn on our heaters, and many people don't have winter coats.
Right.
And when the storm's coming, I had planned to go to Sacramento 2 weeks, backing up 2 weeks. I had planned to go to Sacramento.
Right.
Something told me on my way to the airport, don't get on that plane.
Wow, you're already on your way to the airport.
I was on my way to the airport in Austin.
Wow.
And something just told me, don't get on that plane. If you do, you won't be back in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called the friend that I was going to visit. I was actually going to visit my best friend in Sacramento. And it had been planned. We were both very excited. And I called her and I said, I can't come.
Wow.
And I hated doing that, but I did. And then I stayed in the Austin area because that night the weather started to come in a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. I needed some car service. I stayed. I got my car taken care of. And Sunday, I talked with my husband. We made, okay, this is the window. This is the window for you to get home.
Right.
And I left about noon on Sunday, and my 2.5 hour drive took 7 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Actually closer to 7.5.
So you kicked off your week with that
I kicked
lengthy
off
drive.
my week.
Oh geez.
And then I came back, and my car was iced over. It had sleet. My windshield wipers at this point weren't working, but I did make it home, and I'm thankful that I did. I didn't ever feel in danger driving. I took it very slow. It was just the conditions that you don't want to drive in.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like everyone else here, Monday morning, I woke up to the mess.
Right.
And temporarily, I'm filling in and helping the Port Lavaca Wave, which is the local newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And so that Monday morning, I got up and I first went to my office, which is in Nautical Landings building.
Mm-hmm.
I went there and I didn't have any power. My power had kicked off at home, and then I went to the Wave, and the Wave still had power. So I started working. I was the only person there because I told the staff, don't come in. And, this is not safe. We'll figure out.
Because this is still Monday, conditions on the road, not ideal.
Not ideal.
Yep.
And about 12:30, the power went out at the Wave.
Oh, no.
And so it was a little bit interesting. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do
What
here?
next?
What next? I have this paper. I have people everywhere. And the ad sales rep still had power. She said, if you need to, come here. And I said, well, let's just see how it goes. I called the press. I said, we're not going to make that window tomorrow for printing. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And we have arrangements with Rockport where we pick up their paper. We print at the same printer. We pick up their paper and bring it back. Mm-hmm. And so I called Rockport. I said, you're going to have to get your own paper tomorrow. I'm not printing tomorrow. I hope to print Wednesday. But I don't know.
Right.
And so, and I'm rambling a little bit, but this kind of leads into my story.
Yeah.
So I went over to City Hall,
mm-hmm.
and I asked our city manager, I said, do you need anything from me? I can't put out a paper. All I can do is keep the community informed. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the role the newspaper staff went into, was keeping the community informed as best we could.
Right.
We were all challenged because of internet and connectivity and power and everything else, just like everyone else.
Right.
But we were working the best we could. And then the next morning we met at the sales rep's house and we started working on a paper. We had our laptops mm-hmm. and we were working on the paper. It was, now the roads were clear, but everything else had started.
Right. There was still quite the fallout just from some folks still without power and then kicked into gear without being with water. Not trying to get ahead of your story, but the good thing is, like you said, you had a place where you are able to meet and do your jobs that was stable. So we started doing that, and I went to the Bower. The Bower did not have power. I had been Monday night to the Bower mm-hmm. Community Center because I realized people don't have a place to go. Right.
They don't have power. They're cold. And the next morning, after we're working on the paper, but it comes to a point we can't do anymore.
Yeah.
And I went over to City Hall again, and literally, I'm having to let them know I'm there because the only person there is the city manager right now. And I just went in, and I was just so sad. I'm like, is there any way to get the power on that grid, just the grid at the Bower, so we can give people a place to go? And while I was there, she tried everything. And
thanks for sharing that, because it's good to hear the other side, mm-hmm. because as a community, people ask questions like that. Well, why isn't this available, or why isn't this on for us as a mm-hmm. For those in need? But you're sharing with us that everything that could have been done was done.
Oh, it was. She was trying everything to get the power on, at least on that grid, mm-hmm. because the rest of the states that had the parts that had rolling blackouts, mm-hmm. that seemed to work well. I have a daughter in the Austin area. She was part of a rolling blackout. Mm-hmm. Her power was on for 2 hours. On for 3, off for 2.
Okay.
But it was a cycle.
Right.
We didn't have that here. There was no reprieve, and nobody knew when the power was coming on.
Right.
And then I heard about this church that said, hey, we have power. We're going to open up.
Right.
And that's actually when you and I met.
So that's something like, for me, I was blown away with the fact that you were driving to places to like you said, you went on into this new gear that was, all right, how can we let the community know what's there to know? And so that meant do anything and all things possible within y'all's means. And so one of those things meant that you were physically driving to different places to make sure that you knew the latest, and then you were going to relay that, to the community. And so, yes, that's how we met. I heard, hey, there's someone there under the porta cachet, and it was really great. I was blown away. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, hey, we are open, and here's what you can pass along information wise. And I was so glad that that's when it got way bigger than I thought it was going to get. I think when I met you, for me, that's when the switch flipped that, oh, this may actually really be of some help, to the community, because we felt a little bit strapped because we also had poor network service. We had, of course, not everybody had internet or a means of getting their information, but anything and every, possible vehicle of getting info out helped. And I was, again, just grateful that you took it upon yourself to drive and connect.
Well, and we were grateful that you were doing that and that we could put the word out to people.
Yeah.
And so then everything kind of snowballed from there.
Right.
I still didn't send a paper to press. What was I going to print? And by the time people got that newspaper, I knew that the information would change.
Mm-hmm.
But Wednesday morning, when my daughter woke up, I was sitting because I have a daughter locally who also had power and had internet and was the only place in town that I could get cell signal, was standing in her cold garage. But
man. Okay.
When my daughter woke up Wednesday morning, I was sitting at her kitchen table finishing up the paper.
Man.
I got the paper off. I got with the staff and I said, okay, now we just tell stories. This is gone. It'll get in people's hands. When it gets in people's hands, it's not our primary focus. Now we need to tell people stories.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did. It was also funny because as we're getting this information out,
right,
I received a call. And my days are a little bit of a blur now because
oh my gosh.
I couldn't really tell you if it was Tuesday night that I received this call or Wednesday, but it was whenever the water situation started.
Yeah.
And I think it was actually Tuesday night. HEB called me and they said, what's going on with the water? I said, we don't have any water.
Exactly, yeah.
I explained the situation. And a little while later, they called me back and they said, you get porta potties. I said, yes, I do for events. And they said, we can't open if we don't have restrooms.
Yeah.
Restrooms. We can't open tomorrow. And so Tuesday night, I called my portable restroom contact that I use for different events.
That is so smart. I didn't even think about that. Having porta potties.
They had to have them.
Yeah.
They could not open without them
Wow.
And I'm not sure whether it was a corporate thing or it's a health department thing. I don't know why they couldn't open without them,
right,
but I know they couldn't open without them.
Yeah.
And so I called my contact on his cell phone. I said, I have a situation. And he said, can you send me an email? Because I'm going to have to send this off to other people. So I had to go back to where I could get signal.
Right.
Sent the email with, basically outlined the conversation we just had, copied HEB on it, and they made arrangements to get portable restrooms. Even though the weather and the roads, they were getting another round of it. We got portable restrooms to HEB.
Awesome.
And you don't think of those things.
No, not at all. So again, here's your given routine on a weekly basis. Everything's just flipped upside down on its head.
It is.
And here you are ordering portalettes for our local HEB to keep it going. I promise you, everybody in our community is, singing praises because we needed our grocery store at full capacity and strength as much as it could be. So, wow. So, man, I didn't realize that was, again, your role too, getting that going.
I hadn't planned on it being my role. And that's the thing that I do that I enjoy doing.
Right.
Is where can I help? what resources do I have from my other experiences?
Right.
I mean, had I not been doing events in town, I wouldn't have had that contact.
Right.
And so that was pretty dang cool, I thought.
So it's safe to say that week was a lot of that.
All
It's just
week long.
You running to the source, whether it was to give an update to the community or running to a need to make sure that you were able to get people in service. And we talked a little bit about this before recording, but you said that a lot of what happened this first week bled into the second week. In what ways did some of that carry over? Because here we are, getting power back on, getting our pipes fixed, making sure that we're, as much as possible back to a normal routine so that people can be back at their jobs. But for you, since you spent a whole week, in the meantime, you're still a publisher with the Wave, but you spent a whole week continuing, meeting needs, but yet, I mean, how'd that trickle over?
So towards the end of the week, we were at the Bower doing just letting people come fill up. The fire truck was there, and Texas AgriLife was there filling up containers so people could.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Could flush their toilets and things at home.
Yeah.
And then that kind of bled over. Sunday was beautiful with 70 degrees.
Reminded us we were still in Texas.
Yes. And all of a sudden, Monday rolls around. We're still under a boil order. And so people still don't have water. There's limits at the grocery store. And AEP called. Actually, I think the city manager texted me Monday morning. She said, AEP has some water. I've told them you're the contact. And I said, okay, I can take it from here.
Right.
And so we set up, AEP delivered 2 pallets of water to my office Monday afternoon.
Okay.
So that's really, it's like 96 bottles, or 96 cases, not bottles, 96 cases of water. Had to be offloaded by hand. And so the AEP truck driver, myself, the girl in my office, somebody else, we offloaded all this, stacked it outside, set it up to do a drive-through water pickup.
Right.
Should have been, we had got the word out pretty quickly. The television station got it on their website, and the 5 o'clock news, the newspaper had it. We got the word out pretty quickly. And we had this just drive by. It was 1 case per vehicle. We had it set from 6 to 8, and by 6:30 we were out.
Yeah.
And I felt horrible. I mean, because people still
you saw some folks still in line.
Still in line. That was the worst thing, was not to be able to give water to those folks. And then by Tuesday, though, things were starting to get back to normal.
Right.
But it was just every day, it was something different. People still have broken pipes. They're number 47 on the plumbers list. I mean, you know, we only have so many plumbers in town. Yeah. And everybody's working just long days, long nights. The public works guys, oh my gosh, those guys don't get enough credit. I want to give those guys.
Man, let's give them credit.
Let's give them credit.
You did such a good job with this local article that you had written, and you were giving credit to many folks that you said don't normally get the spotlight on them. And so if there's, I think this is a good time to make that plug.
These guys, and there's so many people in this community that stepped up to the plate. I mean, the churches, the YMCA, so many people. But these guys, there may be some gals I don't know, but they worked, I mean, preparing for the storm. They're preparing everything. Then the storm hits, and there's pipes busting everywhere, and they're having to turn off water, and they are out in these elements where we're all trying to stay in and stay warm as best we can.
Yeah.
they're out in these elements, and they're having the same issues at home that everybody else is. They don't have power. They don't have water. And every time they turn around, there's another leak to go take care of.
Right.
And they haven't stopped yet.
Right. That's the reality.
The reality is they have not stopped yet. Thursday morning, and we touched on this before the interview, I got a call that Randolph Air Force Base was sending a bunch of water. We ultimately ended up with 6 semi-trucks of water. Well, all of that has to be offloaded.
Right.
So in the course of not only my day changing, I had to call Public Works. They had to come. Those guys were there till 8 o'clock Thursday night unloading water. I mean, that's all they did. We had 3 forklifts running. Coastal Nail and Tool sent a forklift. We had 3 forklifts running. I wasn't doing anything other than, bringing people together.
Right.
I wasn't the one doing the heavy lifting. It's these guys that, people are yelling at because they don't have water. They're the ones offloading and doing
breaking
these
their
things,
back, making sure
their
that
backs
we're
to
good.
do things, and people don't really see that. That there are so many people, and it's more than just a job to them. Yes, it's their job. Yes, they get paid to do their job, but it's more than that.
It's okay to say that there's definitely cases where it's above and beyond, and this was definitely one of those calls to be above and beyond at every moment. And if you're doing that from day to day 2 to day 3 to 4 and beyond, it takes a special breed to still wake up and say, okay, I'm going to make this commitment to be above and beyond and make sure my community just has what it needs. And so you're saying with your own eyes, you were just seeing that right before your eyes just take place.
I saw that so many places. I mean, so many places, so many people.
Right.
Willing to step up to the plate and stepping up wherever they could.
Yeah.
And Public Works, those guys, I mean, people they have no clue. And a lot of your volunteer firefighters and people like that. I mean, there's just so many people that are just out that have a heart for the community.
Right.
And then that's kind of what I said in my article.
Yes.
And that's what it is. It's the heart of a community.
To me, that was the quintessential article that could have been written over this past events because, again, to the best that you could, you listed out. It almost seemed like there was like 30 on the list, and it's kind of crazy to think in a community that's our size that there easily could have been, more that were just behind the scenes, and they would have rather had kept it behind the scenes. There's just some folks that they just want to do a great deed and just let that be, the goodness that's recognized in and of itself, just for people to be encouraged or people to have their needs met. But the amount of people in our community that stepped in to serve, and then unfortunately there was those that I know they would have if they had the means to, hands down they would have. So for you being in this role that was connected to all these different people who are stepping in and make sure our Calhoun County kept running, for you, I mean, what was the drive and catalyst for the people to do what they were doing? Was there something that stood out to you that you saw that was pretty common? Was there a commonality they shared with the people who stepped in, or what resonated with you?
What resonated, it was people thinking beyond themselves.
Okay.
Outside themselves. They weren't just thinking of themselves. They were thinking of their neighbor. They were thinking of their neighbor's children. They were frustrated with their situation. Everybody had a little bit of a different situation. Everybody, some people had power, some people that didn't. I think some of the people that had power throughout the thing felt guilty that they had power. They really did.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
They're like, I have power, yet this person doesn't.
Right.
So I saw people inviting people into their homes
Right.
to stay. And, without, I don't think they would necessarily want me to put them out there.
Right.
But they did. They were inviting coworkers to come stay with them, and not even, just come.
Right.
Just come and be here and be warm. There's a lot of love in this community.
Isn't that cool to highlight? Isn't it fun to know that like this is true for our community? Because yes, every place is going to have some lowlights, right? We're not trying to be dissonant with reality or something like that. Like, sure, there's some places where, we struggle a bit. There's some things that we can learn to improve on, but to actually be able to say that we're a community that shows heart in a true, genuine, pure way, that's awesome. Like, to see with our own eyes.
It really is. Every community has those, that. I mean, I think every community. I don't know that we're unique in that. I just think that
it's special.
It's special. You don't always see it,
right?
And that's why. And in my article that listed out like 30 things, it was way too long for a news article, and I knew that.
Oh, really? I don't know. I thought it was great. But
way too long if you were just writing a normal news article.
Okay.
But it was
I think it was worth bending those rules. If there are rules, I would say that was worth bending.
Rules because that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And since I've left the paper, I've written for the paper periodically ever since I've left, and other papers' columns. A lot of times I just, will do that on my own little Facebook or whatever, and that was way too long for Facebook. So it's like, okay, I got to put it somewhere to start it.
To share, yeah.
But there was just so much that I wanted to say, and so much that I saw. I mean, when you see, because on the flip side of that, you saw a lot of fear in our community. And people were afraid that they weren't going to be able to get milk for their child.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you explain to that child, you don't have milk? They were afraid of, how long is my power going to last? If I do have power, how long is my generator going to last if I'm fortunate enough to have a generator, but I can't get gas because the gas pumps aren't open? And when is this going to end? Because I think in everybody's mind going into it, I think the common thread I saw was, we knew the weather was going to get bad. We knew the roads were going to get bad. Right. We knew we might be without power for a little while.
Right.
But we never anticipated as many days without power.
Right.
As we had. And if some people hadn't stepped up in the community and did what they did, we'd have been reading this week about people that died. I mean, we would have. We've seen it other places. And it makes me really sad. I mean, it just...
To know that was a possibility.
Right.
Yeah.
That could have been a completely different outcome.
Right.
For our community if it weren't for the people in our community.
Yeah. And, for me, I was so glad because I felt like what you wrote needed to be said, because I think it's always great when you have something that captures, because when you write a week out like that, time does a weird thing where if 2 months goes by, you can easily start questioning, like, was it really that exceptional of a time? Like, it really stunk, but, we made it through. It's like we need to capture that. And so what you wrote, I really believe captured that, because it really does share that reality that we needed that strength and heart as a community to come together. Because like you said, it easily could have been a different story. We have to remember that, no, it took all of the cooperation of everyone who was able to come together to find strength in that. Because, hearing from people who are looking you in the eye and they say, and this isn't just, this is just me sharing my experience, but I know others have different experiences, but I had people that communicated to me, my living residence was 30 degrees internally. and you're thinking, oh my gosh, like, a day of that isn't good for the human body. Or for some folks that I came in contact, Thursday, and them finally coming in to get shelter or to, get warm, and they're saying, I didn't have power since Sunday. I just barely found out that there was shelters even for us to get warm in. And I'm like, well, what'd you do this whole time? They're like, well, we knew it was hard to get groceries, so we just kind of rode out with the limited water we had, and we were freezing and just under blankets. And you're thinking, like, what is it even like to go through something like that? It's like it's weird being on the other side of it, and to think that, but that happened. And then there's probably others who experienced that we're just not hearing from. And so then you start to really understand the weight of, you have no other choice but as a community to have to pull together if you want the community to make it.
Right.
And so again, that to me, I was just glad it was captured, because it's one of those, let's not forget it. Let's not that we want it to happen again anytime soon, but we have to remember that there is no plan B other than there needs to be this sense of community to pull together. Because like you said, fear does a weird thing.
It does.
When you think that you may not have gas in your car and that's what's keeping you warm, or you can't, like you said, have milk for your kid. It doesn't take much. We're pretty fragile that way. It doesn't take much to really get us, in a stir. But thankfully, our story had a little bit more of a heart to it after all.
It did. And I think it highlights some things, like you said, with a plan B. There's times that the Bauer Community Center is a plan B. That couldn't happen this time. Now,
right.
There may be some things down the road that could change that. But sometimes you have to move to plan B, C, D.
Right.
And
right.
To know, and like you and I had even talked, if the church had lost power, the theater had power. It wouldn't have held many, but would have put people,
keep someone from freezing.
To keep somebody from freezing.
Yeah.
And,
right.
Probably, if I had to guess, you were the same way I was when you said, hey, we're going to do this. You had people that jumped right in and said, we'll help.
Right.
Did you? I mean,
thankfully, yes.
Yes.
No. So here's a story I like to tell, is that I feel like they drug me with it, because it was kind of like didn't realize what kind of can of worms we were opening up, in a good way, because it went bigger than, and to me, I say that because the people that were there, how, like you shared earlier, you said that there was folks that felt somehow guilty that they had power, and, they wanted to like help other people by bringing them over and having them stay warm and that kind of thing. Well, the crazy thing was, threw it out there to the church. Hey, if you get this message, I just want you to know, if you're in a condition that's not good, tell your friends, get the word out, but come here and get warm. And so the people that got the message showed up, and they're like, all right, so we're here. Now what? Like, it's great that we're warm, but can't we like put together some food or something? And also like let others who probably don't have food come over here and have something to eat. And so again, they just like really took ownership of that. And so it wasn't just like, okay, cool, I'm going to get the word out. It was like, how can we actually improve our situation, not just for us, but for others who need it? And that was oh my gosh, people are just, they're willing and ready. They just sometimes need a catalyst, and then they just go running with it. Yeah.
Now, do you find that you guys will have a plan for something? Will this be a baseline if something's needed in the future?
Right. So now that it's open, I think doing something like this does set that. If we're able to, again, let's do it. And then let's learn from this to actually improve on our conditions, to hopefully not have this foreboding thought that it can all just go away because it's maybe our turns up to lose power. Or, I think there's something to be learned from others in our community that did prepare and they had auxiliary power. And, for me, it brought me great comfort, like to hear from you, like, hey, if something happens here, here's this option. Like, oh my, I can't even tell you like how relieving it was, because I didn't want to relive Monday, and my Monday was I had family and some people I worked with come over and to stay the night. And then our power went out. And so I felt so bad because I'm like, well, I just invited them all to come somewhere else just to freeze elsewhere other than their own home. And so, I kind of thought like, man, is the shoe going to drop? Are we going to lose power? And we have these people here. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I guess hopefully you have your cars or, maybe we send you to Olivia to Bayside Community Church. I don't know. Thankfully it didn't go that route, but for us, I would say the baseline is, what can we do to help the community? And now next time, what can we do to be ready from what we learned from this experience? Because we're over here thinking that we weren't going to have to do anything remotely close to what we just did until I don't know, hurricane season. And, with us really just opening up, and then it was like, nope, let's learn as we go. Yeah. But, looking at, there's so much to see from yourself. I'm very grateful to see that you're someone that runs to our community's needs, whether it's getting a story out or whether it's, also actually helping people in the community. I think that's tremendously special. Like, we need that. We need people that are, one of the things that we use, and not just trying to promote the church here, but like just our languages, we want to be known for being for Calhoun. We need people in our community that are for our community and that believe in it. And so that's why it's special when we see, some of the people in our community like come together to work. And I mean, just getting to meet you through the recent events, I can tell that you're someone that is for the community, like hands down. You're going to make sure that you take and run with what's necessary to bring and provide what the community needs to know and what the community needs. Now, your like upbringing, just a little bit about yourself. Like, I mean, you ended up working as a publisher for the Wave.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before even going to that, I'm just kind of curious, just so people can know and I can know, how'd you even end up being, as for Calhoun as you are, how'd you end up even being here in Calhoun? Like, what path led you here?
In 1999.
Okay.
That's about where it goes back to. I had gone through a divorce, and it was Christmas time. I had 3 kids, and I was away from family, and I had a brother here. Brother that lived here.
Right.
Actually was a counselor in Port Lavaca. And so I came to visit him. I called him Christmas Eve, and I'm like, I'm lonely. I want to come visit you. And actually, backing up, that was actually Christmas in 98.
Okay.
And I came to visit him, brought the kids, spent Christmas Day with him, maybe the day after, and went home. And then, fast forward later in 99, it was about August of 99. I came to see my brother again.
Okay.
I was getting ready to move to Colorado. I was going to work in Colorado, in Denver, and I was going to move the kids, and I had a job, but I was having a terrible time finding housing.
Okay.
I could not find a place to live. But I came down to see my brother, ended up through a weird course of events, ended up making the decision to move here. And I wasn't working at the paper or anything like that. I met through church and my brother and all of that, which was actually Parkway by the Bay way back then.
Oh man, so that's a little bit of a history there.
So that's a little bit of a history there. And I ended up moving here.
Okay.
And late 99, and it was just a weird change of events. I joke that I was headed to Denver and made a wrong turn. And that's sort of what happened.
20 plus years later now,
Yes.
well, it's kind of weird to say that.
Isn't it?
I like to think of 1999 like 10 years ago.
I know, and it's not.
Oh man. Yeah. And here it was a decision to stay after all.
So it was. And I ended up going to work for the newspaper and just basically grew into my role in the community.
Right.
I was a reporter and ended up as general manager, then ended up as publisher. And as you do that, as you're a reporter, you see the best and worst of a community. You see a lot of great things, see a lot of bad things, but you just start to see things. And then all of a sudden I realized, this is home.
Right.
I had met my husband. We actually met, not the first trip to Port Lavaca, but the second one, and went to church together and all of that. And then we ended up getting married about 5 years later. But it was a whole weird chain of events. And
sometimes they unfold that way.
They do. They really do. Who would have thought? And so here I am 20-something years later.
And so you carried through with some experience that you previously had as a reporter beforehand. So how long, how many years were you reporting up to this point that you came here to Calhoun?
So I had been a reporter for Dun & Bradstreet. I had not been in a newsroom. I was actually with Dun & Bradstreet, and so it was all business and technical reporting.
Right.
But I had grown up around it. My dad was a newspaper editor, and so I knew that. Sorry, I have a little bit of a scratchy throat, so it's.
And I can still get you some water if you want some more.
All of a sudden it got scratchy. So my first written published piece.
Okay.
I was about 8 years old, and I'm in Kansas, and the newspaper had run a contest, and I actually won the contest and had my work published.
Okay.
And I have a little picture of me sitting outside the newspaper office with my little published news article.
Right.
And so I guess I just kind of always grew into it.
Well, and that's so another question I have for you is, writing, from what I can see, for you is a medium of emphasis, right? Like it's not TV, it's not radio or music. Is there a reason, other than, it sounds like you had a good experience at that moment where you got some of your work published at a young age. Now, were there some other moments like that reinforced that writing is something that you wanted to pursue?
I like telling people's story. I never felt like I would be confident in front of a camera.
Okay.
And so writing was that was my avenue.
Right.
I don't know today that it would matter how I told those stories, whether it's on a podcast, whether it was on television, whether it was, on radio. I just like telling people's stories.
Right.
And as a reporter, I got to do that. And again, it was good. I was always, from an investigative standpoint and things like that, I could do investigative reporting well, but it wasn't my passion. My passion is more of the feature articles and, just what makes people tick, and that became my medium to do that.
Right.
It's also just a way that I express myself.
Right.
I write a lot of things that I don't know that I write for. I was always one to poke fun at myself when I was a columnist. I could write, fun at myself or my family. My kids got drug in a lot. They're like, "Oh my God, what'd you write now?"
Oh, really?
Oh yes. In school, they'd come home. They're going, "Mom." If it was anything serious, I would always make sure to run it by them first.
Sure. But they were involved in some of the columns you wrote.
Yes, they were involved. And so they tended to be more humorous in nature because I found myself, I'm a private person in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And I guess that was my way of when I was like, okay.
You can put this out. Yes.
This is me. And so it can be funny. It can be serious.
Right.
It can be whatever. This is me. And
right. That was your element. And so you felt like you could take ownership and be expressive as creatively as you comfortably would, which apparently it sounds like you were able to find a zone for you to work with it. Now, looking, as your ability to connect and tell stories, through that medium and as a reporter, I mean, what are some things about being a reporter that, man, people who are the consumers may not really totally, capture ourselves or may not be in the know of?
Well, mainstream media gets, we all hear, well, mainstream media, mainstream this and that.
Right.
And the other. But when you work in a newsroom, we're all people, and we try to put our opinions and everything aside. There's a lot of research that goes into, a good reporter doesn't just write a story.
Right.
One of the biggest of my career, we researched 18 months before we ever printed one single word.
18 months.
And the way it came about was somebody had been everywhere.
Okay.
And then they came to me because somebody locally said, you can trust her. You can tell her your story.
Right.
And so they did, and I'll never forget it. And the first thing I did, I didn't make any promises. It was, I will check this out.
Okay. That's fair.
And as I started checking it out, there's rabbit holes. And I started following this, and I'm like, okay, there's something there.
Right.
But it took 18 months to connect all the dots and get everything before we ever printed a word. And most of the time, you just don't see something like that. That's an unusual case.
Okay.
But a good reporter really does research and there's a lot of behind the scenes that people don't see, and people don't see the other side of a reporter, especially a small town reporter.
Mm-hmm.
They see a lot of bad things, and you go to a house fire and somebody's lost everything, and you're there and you're doing your job,
asking questions.
Well,
and or just taking things in.
You take things in.
Okay.
It's my philosophy that you can get the information you need later. In some cases, you're just taking things in, and and I have a little different philosophy than a lot of reporters. But how I try to instill in any reporter I've ever worked with, number one, you'll burn a source once. So don't do it because you'll never get the opportunity to do it again. Number two, if you're out at an active scene, don't make first responders have to worry about your safety. You take care of your own safety.
Okay, good.
So those are a couple of things. But from that standpoint, there's things that affect you. One of the stories, I hadn't planned to tell this story, but I will.
Okay.
I was a reporter. I wasn't anything more than a reporter.
Okay.
And there was a house fire. And this was years and years ago. I was one of the first on the scene just behind the fire department. The paper was about to go to press, and they were holding for whatever photos I got. And I got there, and I watched firemen bring out 3 charred babies.
Oh, my gosh.
One after another. Probably one of the worst things that I've ever covered in my career. It was horrible.
Wow.
I'm behind the camera. I'm rapid shooting firing. I didn't ask questions because I want those firefighters to be able to do their job and EMS to be able to do their job. They don't need to be messing with me.
Right.
They held me a spot for the photo. And I think there is a story to be told about firefighters fighting a fire.
Yeah.
But again, I was rapid fire shooting. I went back. I handed my camera to the person that was laying out the paper. I went to wash my hands. I came back out, and there was a photo with the firefighter carrying a charred baby. I said, if you run that photo, we're not running that photo. We
Yeah.
are not running that photo. And he said, that's the money shot. I said, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I walked into the publisher's office at the time. I said, if you run that photo, today will be my last day here. I'm sorry, I can't do this. And we ended up doing what I felt should be done was a picture of a firefighter fighting a house fire.
Right.
No charred babies, no anything. Now,
Right.
we did later, the fire chief asked me, he said, I know you shot photos. I would like them. My guys are having a really hard time seeing that they did everything that they could. And as part of their debriefing and recovery, I'd like to be able to use those.
Wow.
And I did give them to the fire department.
Yeah.
I had no problem with that. So as a reporter, maybe I helped them a little bit, but there's still that level of integrity. And there's nothing worth.
You're still trying to cleave on your humanity too, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then you go home and you don't just leave that. You're unemotional while you're shooting it. You're there, you're doing your job, you're in your zone, but you leave and you take that with you. And I think people don't realize that about reporters. You know, we have hearts just like anybody else, and then you go home and you still
Right.
I saw that picture that was ingrained in me for
right.
And every single time to this day that I drive by that house, it's been rebuilt. You would never know.
Well, you'll never forget.
But you'll never forget.
So for those that, for those of us that, again, we consume news and we're not always in the know that there's, like you shared earlier, you said that there's 18 months of prep work that goes into, especially if it's going to be
an investigative type.
An investigative type, but still the effort that goes in, the due diligence. Now, what's your, I don't know, how do you keep an attitude of service to a community when I would imagine sometimes you get the dismissive, well, they don't know what they're talking about, or
you do get that.
Yeah. How do you redirect that?
Sometimes you can't, and sometimes you have to just have a shell that says, okay, this isn't me personally. I know I did the best that I could do.
Right.
You do develop sources, and you hope that those sources, if you do fall short, that they will let you know, hey, you missed the boat in this, and that happens. And I think the biggest thing is if you do miss the boat, if you've reported something incorrectly, you've heard something incorrectly, that you immediately get out there and take ownership.
Right.
Because everybody makes mistakes,
Right.
It happens, and it's not because they maliciously make the mistake.
Correct.
It's just,
hey, we're human.
Yeah, we're human.
Yeah.
And so you have to take ownership of it. You have to correct it as soon as possible. I mean, that's just part of a reporter's creed, if you will,
Right.
is, you correct it as soon as you can if it's wrong.
Right. How does that work with, with, I know our paper, it's really interesting, right? So in the sense that we come out once a week. So this is the Port Lavaca Wave. Have you felt the tension of, I mean, maybe I'm asking this out of ignorance, but if there had to be, what would they call it? A redaction or
They
what's
would call it either a clarification or a
clarification
correction.
or a correction, clarification or correction.
Mm-hmm.
How, with us coming out once a week, has there ever been a situation where as soon as you find out, you're realizing, okay, this clarification may not come out until next week, and have you had to go about other ways of communicating the clarification before the next week follows?
We have. It's been for the longest time when I was with the paper, and as you know, I'm just filling in temporarily right now.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a weekly, so I always had that opportunity to quickly come back within a couple of days and get that out there.
Great.
Now it's a little bit different because, like you said, a week goes past. We immediately try to correct it electronically.
Right.
If we can, get that story fixed, the e-edition fixed. Mm-hmm. So at that point, you've scaled back on that, and then you run a clarification the next week. Right. We even had that through the course of the storm. There was something that wasn't clear about the sewer system that I think was worded in a way that maybe didn't make sense.
Okay.
And we immediately went in and, okay, we need to clarify this because It doesn't make sense. It's not exactly the right picture that we're portraying. And so I'm a strong believer in fixing it quickly. I hope the person that follows behind me will
follow suit.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's great to know. I mean, not that I personally have any doubts that, due diligence is followed. I understand it takes work. It takes hard work. And especially just like anybody who works in construction doesn't want to hear the dreaded word of known as rework. No one wants to hear that. That's not fun for anybody. So no doubt you guys are always wanting to shoot for getting it right, the first time. But I'm so glad that we have clarifications and that we have that, and I appreciate the integrity and the decision to say, hey, sometimes we may miss the boat, but, let's let the community know that we have their back, and we're going to let them know what we need them to know as soon as possible. So now, what are a couple of things that, if, for those listening that maybe they're not too familiar with the Port Lavaca Wave because maybe that's not something they subscribe to themselves yet, or maybe all they do is just consume the Port Lavaca Wave by Facebook articles that get shared. What are some things that you would like to let them know about our local paper?
So our local paper has been here since 1890. Ooh. A lot of people don't know that. It's moved to a couple different locations, and then in the late 80s, it moved to its present location. It actually, prior to that, was located just behind where it's located now, which ultimately became a paper warehouse.
Right.
Because for a long time, the Wave was a daily, then it went to 3 times a week, and then it was probably 2 times a week for 25 years or so.
Okay.
It was a twice weekly when I left it in 2018. It had a full operating press room, and people didn't know that we printed all the area papers with the exception of the Advocate. Mm-hmm. It was printing Palacios and Edna and Cuero, Rockport, a variety, the Dolphin Talk from Port O'Connor. It printed a variety of papers. As the press aged, you just couldn't get parts anymore. Okay. And with the way it's hard to find press people in Port Lavaca, it's hard to do press repairs in Port Lavaca.
It's a very niche.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And so ultimately, the Wave moved its printing to Rosenberg, to the parent company.
Okay.
And so that's where they print now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left and I found my niche. I have just stepped in just temporarily while they look for a new publisher.
Mm-hmm.
And
so we can talk about also what you find yourself doing now. Like you're kind of an all needs, on call person, but you are the president of Something More Media, and definitely want to give you an opportunity to share, a little bit more about what that entails, and then also what does that entail for a place like Calhoun.
Okay, so it's Something More Media. It was born out of newspapers' needs. I found working at a small newspaper,
right,
that there were a lot of things that I needed that nobody knew how to give me.
Okay, there were some hurdles just to get to
just
those.
Hurdles. I wanted to be able to do things digitally that nobody seemed to know how to tell me how to do or how to implement. And social media, how do you implement this? And there were just all these little things. And then being a small paper that's part of a larger group, even though small paper operated autonomously, there wasn't really anybody with the group that knew different systems.
Okay.
And being a hands-on person, it's like, I've got to learn this stuff. And so I did, and I found that other papers were calling me to come help them.
They said, me too.
And I was still publisher of the Wave, and these were all sister publications, so it was okay, but it became too much for me in some ways.
Well, it sounds like a lot. Yes.
Yeah, it was just a lot. And so I gave my employer a lot of notice and ended up leaving and starting my own company. And they were my first client, actually. So the company that I worked for 20 years was my first client. They're still our client.
Yeah.
And which is why I stepped back in to help them with the Wave, too, because they needed somebody, and I would do that. I've helped with other newspapers when they've been without a publisher that might not even be sister papers.
Right.
But we found that we had this niche for helping newspapers bridge the gap. And that's the best way. I don't have a great elevator speech.
Sure. Your elevator pitch.
Yeah, my elevator pitch is we bridge the gap.
Mm-hmm.
So newspapers are finding themselves with smaller newsrooms, smaller staffs, smaller everything, and sometimes they need people to bridge that gap or just take a project and figure it out for them.
Right.
And so I have a team of people that does that, and that's what they do.
I'm kind of visualizing like this Rubik's Cube that needs to get put back together, and whoever's in need of this aid or resource is like, hey, here's what I got. Let's see what you can do with this to make sure that, like you said, the gaps are filled, or you get them from A to B, and that's awesome. I think that's great, and I find it pretty fascinating that there is immediate benefit to our community through that, because you were able to turn that around and say, well, hey, the Port Lavaca Wave, here's what we can do for you, because I know what it's like to be in a position where I'm looking, to try to get from A to B. And, let's get on board with some of these technological resources that maybe unfortunately have yet to be explored. So,
so that's a little bit of what we do. I don't do a lot of that day in, day out anymore, though.
Okay.
I have a team that does that, other than that, some of the higher level technical, or sometimes the creative side of things, if they need somebody to bounce things off of. We've branched into branding and marketing and social media management. And so we have a girl that's all she does is social media management.
It definitely is a full-time thing.
It is.
It
and
really
she does
is.
it for a variety of companies. We are the face behind the face of people you wouldn't even imagine.
That's cool.
Doing things like that. But I found my passion with the community and working with the chamber and the city through a city chamber partnership
Right.
for events.
Yeah.
And it takes me back to my days at the roller skating teen clubs, doing all those things where I was just planning events. And they needed, again, it was a case where the person that was doing a little bit of it,
Right.
they left, and it was, will you fill in and help with Iguana Fest? And I said, sure. And then I ended up with a team of volunteers. We have a core team of volunteers that kind of plan the events.
Okay.
But that has branched out in so many different directions. That could be a whole thing in itself.
just to break that down.
Just to break that down.
Right.
Because there's a team that helps with driving movies. There's a team that helps with Iguana Fest or Flip Flop or different things. There's all these different groups, and that's my passion of bringing these groups together.
So that's your role with these events that we've come to enjoy here in Calhoun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're able to facilitate these different teams. So in a way, you're like you're providing these teams to be able to go out and make sure that each one of these events is as good as it possibly can. So maybe even more so, can you break down a little bit what your influence is on these different events, like Iguana Fest, Flip Flop Festival, now possibly the fair as well, some hands in that?
It's a little bit different for each thing. So anything that is a City of Port Lavaca event.
Okay.
I'm the project manager.
There you go. Okay.
That's probably a good term. It's called events coordinator. I'm chairman of the events committee, but it's basically you're the project manager.
Right.
You, and so like with Iguana Fest, there's somebody that handles vendors. There's somebody that handles different aspects of it.
Takes a lot to pull an event.
Alcohol, things like that. I'm that constant kind of big picture person, and I'm pulling it together. I'm booking the entertainment. I'm making sure we have the restroom facilities.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
We have somebody that handles the youth events, somebody that handles different things. So I'm just more of the project manager for the events. I'm the face that goes to council to
kind of keep all the glue and keep it in, the everything in motion.
Right.
Yeah.
And as it's COVID was a big change for us. So we went from...
You read my mind. I was curious to know what does COVID now do to all this?
So prior to... So we all know we had Hurricane Harvey in 2017. That kind of moved flip-flop around. So that was my first canceling of an event a week before in the rain, standing where I could get cell signal.
Oh, my gosh.
It was interesting. Fortunately, I had emailed everybody right before I lost power, so they were all expecting it. But then we go to Iguana Fest. We've had a couple of successful years with Iguana Fest and Flip Flop and all of those things. We launched the summer concert series, which when I first thought of that and approached council with it, it was set up. I wanted it to be a place where people could go. They didn't have to plan in advance. They didn't have to get dressed up. They didn't have to find a sitter for the kids. They could just go. And so we had our 6-week summer concert series called Bayfront Beats. This past year was the 4th year of that. And you can show up just as you are. It's set. There's a reason it's not under the pavilion at Bayfront Peninsula Park. It is in an area where kids can run and be kids. Right. And parents can sit back and relax. And
all the parents were like, yes.
Yes. And so we started that, and that's grown each year. Well, when we we fast forward to 2020 with COVID, and I'll never forget, I had been in Austin because I had it was my second year to run a stage facility, a venue for South by Southwest.
Oh, okay.
And so I was pretty excited. TikTok was
On
TikTok was my premier thing. I was really excited about this South by Southwest, but I'd been to a meeting because South by Southwest was being canceled because of COVID.
Yeah.
And I came back and I thought, well, that won't affect us. People come from internationally to South by Southwest. That's not really going to affect us. And then the hospital requested a meeting with the mayor,
right,
and myself and the city manager. They requested this meeting. And so we're all on the phone. We're all on a conference call. I'm sitting over at City Hall, and we were like a month out from Iguana, and they were asking us to cancel Iguana Fest. And I said, well, do we have to cancel right now? Can't we just wait and see? It won't matter. As long as I cancel a week out, everything's already, what we've paid for, and what we haven't, we haven't. It's not going to be a cost difference. And they said, well, you can do that, but we really don't think it's going to change.
Yeah.
And little did I know it really didn't change. So we canceled Iguana Fest. We adjusted our 4th of July event and did an app. And normally we do music and sell alcohol and do all that at the Bayfront Park.
Right.
We opened this up, did an app. We had as many people at Lighthouse Beach as we did at Bayfront Park. And Bayfront Park, it was packed.
Wow.
It was amazingly packed. But we didn't do the music and all of that. Then we rolled into Summer Concert Series. And that always starts the week after all the area fireworks are done.
Yeah.
6 weeks. Then I went back to council. And we, at that point, near the end of it, they said, we need to cancel Flip Flop. And I'm like,
man,
okay, can I go 2 more weeks with summer concerts? And they said, sure. And then I said, what if we did a drive-in movie?
Right.
And they said, okay. So we ended up doing our first drive-in movie the weekend that Flip Flop would have been.
Right.
And we actually brought in a company to do that. Mm-hmm. And so it was just, they came in, did all the setup. We just promoted it, picked the movie, did all that. Then the county fair got canceled. And so I went back to city council and I said,
it's like, there you go, like running to, you're like, back. Okay, I love that though. You don't sit back on your heels. You're very, this is a need now, or
this is a need.
Let's do something about it.
People in our community were so tired of just being in, not doing things.
Right.
In the end, they approved. We went 14 weeks with the summer concert series. Mm-hmm. Normally 6. We did 4 drive-in movies. We purchased our own system, with the exception of the sound part of that, and we use our regulars. We have a regular sound guy that does all our concerts.
Yeah.
He learned how to do drive-in movie transmission for us, so we broadcast to an FM or an FM station.
Right.
We learned how to do that. I had a team that learned how to take down this massive screen and put up this massive screen and do everything. So we have...
Gotta have a team.
Yeah. And so we did these 4 drive-in movies. And then the Sand Crabs went to the playoffs. And that
was awesome. That was so awesome.
That was really cool because we worked with the publisher of the paper, which wasn't me at the time. But it was one of those needs. They called me and they said, we want to figure out how to broadcast this. This is Fox Sports Southwest. These are their parameters. You know our technical capabilities. Can you find us something that works? And literally, and we were actually written up in a a publishing magazine, because what we did is we figured this out. We implemented it. We got it ordered in 2 days. We learned how to use it. Ross was up at the football stadium doing that part. I contacted Fox Sports Southwest, convinced them to let me show it at the Bayfront.
Right.
So we did. And so that first week of playoffs, you could drive up there. It was the coolest thing. These people that couldn't go to the game, they'd been watching sand crabs. I mean, we had 70 and 80-year-old people, and we had, 15, 16-year-old people. They're all watching the football game. They were all in their cars or sitting next to them and cheering and
probably honking horns.
It was amazing. And then the next week, the bubble got burst because people that had the rights to it, there's a group that had first right of refusal. Mm-hmm. And they were in a partnership with somebody else. And all three entities individually wanted to let me show it at the Bayfront. But collectively, one contract would violate another contract, which would violate another. And so we didn't get to show it. But it was amazing that first time.
Yeah.
And
well, again, it goes to show like what can be possible whenever you're willing to do whatever it takes to see it through. And wow, that was awesome.
It was what was really cool. Well, all these communities were canceling things.
Yeah.
We had 20 events here.
20 events.
20 events, all without an uptick in COVID cases.
Yeah.
20 events last year. They may not have been the events that we had planned, and even this year they won't all look the same.
Right.
But 20 events when there's other communities that aren't having any events.
Correct.
And no uptick in cases. And we love that.
I was blown away because, living in our bubble here, which is by the coast, Texas, our little reality here, because my friend from Michigan, we're catching up. We used to be roommates in college. And we're just talking. And this was about a month ago that I was having this conversation with my friend, and he just kind of nonchalantly we're just talking, and he just said, yeah, it's good. We finally have, our students going back to school. And I'm like, wait, what? And they just mentioned, yeah, like we're barely returning back to school. We've been doing remote learning this whole time. It just blew my mind. I thought, wait, like this is 2021. Mm-hmm. And it's the second, we're almost, here we are getting to this third quarter of, the year. And then I was like, wait, so what else has been going on? They're like, well, we finally, we can go eat at restaurants, but we're like in these little igloo domes, over there. And, like in Michigan, you could rent out like this little dome just to eat out. And I'm blown away. I'm thinking like, man, dude, we're living in two different worlds right now. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, he goes, I see on Facebook what you guys been doing over there in Port Lavaca. And he's like, what are they doing over here? Like, he goes, I'm just blown away. Like, it's like the Wild West over there compared to what we got going on. Mm-hmm. And, of course, it was great to say like, yeah, thankfully, sure, it ticked higher just generally than we would have loved. We would have loved to sit at 0.00. But it was, his thing was like, it's just good to see the overall community still being able to kind of still live and enjoy some things, because in some pockets and communities in our country, that's just not been what's been happening. And so again, it's so easy to take for granted. We just get in our cars and, thankfully, sure, I know still some places we have masks and, where that's like, a mandatory thing. But, by all means, let's have our due diligence, but being able to have options is like a lifesaver. Mm-hmm. So you're working hard to make sure we had options.
Well, and I loved our options because at all these events, they were outdoors. You could come, you could sit with your family unit. You could interact as much or as little as you felt comfortable.
That's a great point.
I had a couple that called me from Yoakum that wanted to come, and it was fairly early on, and then he said, my wife has a compromised immune system, but we have got to get out of the house. And I said, you can come to this event and you can sit far away with just the two of you. You don't ever have to interact with another soul. And they were so thankful that they could do that. And I loved it because, again, kids could run and be kids. The parents could sit back and relax. And for a little while, COVID wasn't their first thought in their mind. You know, they were either listening to a good band or listening. And really, the only thing we had to change with the summer concert series is we asked, because we provide the sound, we asked our singers to bring their own mics so we didn't have to sterilize the mics every week.
Oh, man, that would
other than that,
yeah, that's a tedious thing.
We didn't really have to adjust our stuff. We just kept going.
Right.
And my team was like, oh my God, we just keep going. But they were all willing. They were all like,
they were willing to go the distance with that. Yeah.
Because they were having the same thing. And if they don't want to be sitting at home either, people needed to be outside. People needed to have some way to interact with other people. Now, we all do the FaceTime thing now, and we all Zoom. Things we never thought we would do. I
really wish I invested in Zoom stock before the year, before 2020. Yeah, it has exploded. But I mean, for me, I remember some interactions I've had with different friends that we have that live in other states. I thought, it's so funny. We would wait until we would physically meet, or maybe there was a phone call. And it just kind of hit me. I'm like, I don't know why it's just hitting me that like Zoom's a thing, because I started actually interacting with certain friends more again because of Zoom. It was weird. It was like we quarantined. I remember at the beginning, since I was at home more, I was looking for ways to connect with people that I had not had a conversation with an extended period of time. And so it kind of in a way created this, like, I don't know, just this little refresher that, you could have been doing this too, just it didn't need to take a pandemic to do it, but it in a way, it was something for me that helped me realize, like, all right, if you want to stay in touch with people, you can get creative. I was just kind of locked into one way of doing it, but you're right. But for an extended period of time, the restlessness kicks in, relational, as people we're relational, and, being out in the sun, especially for us coastal folks.
Yes.
We got to have it. So the ability of addressing I would say, like, us as a community, you never know, like, what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis. But it seems like you have this attitude that says, all right, whatever the task may be, whatever the flavor of the week is, we're going to see it through, we're going to work together in that. I just kind of want to land with this here. If there was, one thing, whether it be a word of wisdom or just something that you would like, people that are listening to you to know, what would it be?
People can do anything they set their mind to. That wasn't something I really planned to say, but as we were talking,
right,
and talking about my different experiences, I was reminded of my mother, and I had a very rocky relationship with my mother always. But she always taught me that, you can do anything you put your mind to. And that's kind of the philosophy I have, but also taking that a step further is and I say this all the time.
Yeah.
Every moment matters. Make the most of this one. And so whatever you're doing, that's my little saying.
I like it. It's catchy. Yeah,
every moment matters. Make the most of this one. And so in whatever you're doing, you have a choice, of how you look at it and what you take from that. And if you look at everything you do is an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to serve, an opportunity to be happy, even in some bad situations. And I mean, and I'll use your church and your people and all of that as an example. You guys could have sat around and done nothing. The situation wouldn't have changed. It wouldn't have changed for you. It wouldn't have changed for anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
You were called to serve, and you did that. But you did that with a joyful heart. And out of that, it didn't change that it was a bad situation for everybody.
Right.
But at the end of the day, did you have a sense, and again, not that you would wish the situation to happen again.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the end, was your heart happy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's,
yeah.
everybody has a choice for their heart to be happy.